Hey everyone, I'm Simon Harris and welcome to the 8th episode of the vlog. So last week the vlog was on the back burner because of the beast from the east, but this week the kind of temperature's warmed up, the snow's melted, so we're going to get back into it. I'm actually going to try and do 2 uploads this week, so I'm finally going to get round to the interview with James from Index Exchange. I'm going to do that on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to talking to him. I'm going to try and upload that either this Friday or the following Monday, maybe at the latest, I promise. And today's episode, I wanted to do something similar to the Apple Intelligent Tracking Prevention video that I did last week. So kind of really take it down, forget about strategy for a second and get into the weeds. That video was really well received. So as I said, I want to look at viewability and I want to talk about whether or not viewability as a percentage is a pointless metric or not. So some pretty deep stuff, lots to talk about. So let's get right into it. Okay, so before we discuss whether or not viewability as a percentage is a pointless metric, we should probably define what viewability is. So for display, it's an ad where 50% of its pixels are in view for 1 second. And for video, it's that 50% in view again, but for 2 continuous seconds. Now, lots of people out there will argue that that's too low a bar, and those people might have a point, but ultimately that seems to be the industry kind of standard that everyone's settled on. In platforms, there's a couple that can measure custom viewability. There's also third parties that do that, IAS probably being the notable one. But I kind of feel that the industry standard, that IAB standard, which is kind of everyone's settled on, I think that's what most clients care about. And certainly when I'm talking about viewability today, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's really important for our clients because ultimately an ad that isn't seen has literally no value to an advertiser, right? If someone doesn't see their advert, it can't potentially impact their campaign in any way, shape or form. So that's what viewability is. Now let's discuss whether viewability as a percentage is a pointless metric or not. Okay, so saying viewability as a percentage is a pointless metric is probably a little bit of a clickbaity thing to say, but what I will say is it's certainly less relevant today than it was 5 or 6 years ago. Again, that's a pretty bold statement to say, so let me elaborate on that a little bit. Well, 5 or 6 years ago, the majority of inventory in the UK wasn't transacted programmatically. It was bought with a publisher direct, and it was transacted with fixed prices. And what you would end up doing is you would end up with publisher, say A, spending £3 on an MPU and £3 on a leaderboard. And in that world, you could definitely say that a leaderboard with a 60% viewability was markedly better than an MPU with a 40% viewability. But things have changed a lot in the last 5 or 6 years, right? The majority of inventory when it comes to display is now transacted programmatically. I think between 70 and 75% for display, and for video it's about 10% higher than that, so 85% in 2018. And because it's transacted programmatically, and the majority of that is transacted programmatically in an auction, there's this huge spread in terms of the placements bought, the sites that those placements are bought on, the cost, and also viewability. So looking at the top line percentage in that world no longer makes so much sense. If that didn't all go in, let me break it down into a much simpler example for everyone before we look at something that might actually be better than that hard viewability percentage. Okay, so let me give you an example of where looking at viewability as a percentage might lead you to making some sort of incorrect inferences in one of your campaigns. So let's take Publisher X and Publisher Y. Now, Publisher X is relatively cheap. It costs £1 on a CPM basis, and it has a viewability of 47%, which in the UK is the average viewability according to IAS's latest study on the subject for display. Publisher Y is more expensive. It costs you £1.30, but it has much better viewability. It has a 60% viewability. And a lot of you will be thinking at the moment, well, Publisher Y is definitely the better placement for my trader to buy because the viewability is that much more high. And actually, if you're thinking that, you're a little bit wrong. And let me tell you why. The viewability is definitely much better. But actually, if you look at the cost of putting 1,000 viewable ads in front of your target audience, and really if you consider that viewable impressions are the ones that are valuable and non-viewable impressions have no value to your campaign, Publisher X is actually your better option, right? It has a lower baseline viewability, so it's just UK average, right? But it's that much cheaper than Publisher Y. It's 30 pence cheaper, in fact, that your viewable CPM, so the cost of placing 1,000 viewable ads in front of your target demographic is actually 2% lower. So in this world where we have very, very variable pricing between sites and indeed placements within those sites, and also obviously variances in viewability itself, looking at a viewable CPM is a much better way of doing things. In this kind of world of variable pricing, actually, looking at the viewability percentage seems seems silly, because ultimately that viewability percentage is a vanity metric. Okay, so before we look at some of the potential challenges that optimizing towards a viewable CPM might cause you from a reporting and attribution perspective, we should probably take a step back actually and look at how you stand up a campaign within a DSP to drive that low viewable CPM that your client's looking for. Here I'm going to talk about standard implementations. It's also worth noting that you could use custom algorithms, custom decision trees to drive your VCPM down, but I'm going to take the approach that you would take if you just had a trader and a DSP to deliver a low viewable CPM for your client. So when setting up a brand campaign which might have a viewable CPM goal, the first thing that you're going to want to do if your technology is selective is choose an enterprise level DSP which has not only great viewability pre-bid segments natively within the platform, but integrations with MRC accredited third-party partners as well. So here I'm thinking the likes of Integral and Moat, etc., etc. And you're going to be doing two things here. So the first thing that you're going to be doing is leveraging the pre-bid viewability tools that I've just talked about, and you'll set up a number of line items or campaigns depending on the DSP that you're using that are based around those viewability segments. In terms of which viewability percentage you should choose, well obviously that's going to depend on like a broad range of things, including the whitelist that you're using, how much you want to spend, what your target VCPM is, all of this kind of stuff. But in terms of an actual percentage, if I had to kind of hang my hat on one, I would see that 60% seems to be that sweet spot. If you go above that, you start hitting issues when it comes to scale and competition, certainly when you start looking at 70, 80, 90% levels of expected viewability. So 60 seems to be a kind of sweet spot, and set up a number of line items or campaigns depending on the DSP using those pre-bid tools. And then what you want to do is benchmark that against a viewable CPM algorithm. Most of the enterprise DSPs have a well-tuned VCPM algorithm now, and what you really want to do is benchmark your fixed against your algorithmic buying and look at which one's driving performance. You can shift budget around between your line items as you see fit, and then you can optimize them as you would do normally. So looking at dimensions like potentially how creative impacts, how dimension impacts, how placement impacts, maybe even look at exchanges. And what you can do is you can create duplicate or even triplicate line items or campaigns, and within a very, very short space of time be hitting a very low VCPM for your client. So that's how I suggest you would stand up one of your campaigns. Now we should probably take a look at some of the potential impacts of optimizing a VCPM in this way, the impact that it might have in terms of reporting and attribution specifically. Okay, so as I've alluded to throughout this vlog, there are some challenges that are worth bearing in mind when you're making that shift from looking at a viewable percentage towards looking at a VCPM and optimizing down for a low VCPM. So one of those is perception-based, and one of those challenges is around reporting and attribution. The perceptions-based challenge is very real. If you think about the last 5 or 6 years, both internally at agencies and external when we're talking to the market, whether that's a trade press or clients, we've been talking about viewability percentages. Now we're asking people to kind of unlearn that and look at things slightly differently. I think if you explain what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it in very plain terms to someone, whether that's a buyer or whether that's a client. I think if you do it in the right way, they'll understand what you're trying to do and how what you're trying to do will deliver better business outcomes. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. The reporting and attribution challenge is non-trivial, but it's certainly not insurmountable. What am I talking about here? Well, you may well have campaigns that you're trading which have both a viewability goal and a CPA goal. You might be optimizing now for a VCPM, and you might be trading inventory in a slightly different way now than you were previously, right? So you might have had a 60% target to hit previously and a CPA of say 50 quid. Now you're still going to have that CPA target of 50 quid, right? But you're optimizing towards a low VCPM rather than a viewability percentage. What that might mean is you might be buying inventory which say has a 55% viewability. And that can cause problems from an attribution perspective, because that might mean that the last touch wasn't seen. So what I would say there is to make sure that you're delivering that £50 CPA for your client and your VCPM. Is when you're looking at your CPA, make sure you're looking through the path to conversion, right? So you want to check whether or not your last touch was viewable, and if it wasn't, look up the path and look to see whether in their conversion window you had a viewable touch or not. Because ultimately, you know, we don't want to take credit for transactions that we didn't actually generate. So that's really important to do. What I would say is anecdotally, you won't see much of a change in your CPA when you do that, because you'll see that there'll be multiple display touches through that path to conversion. So some people get hung up on that. It's not one to worry about significantly. You'll see if you're doing a good job already, and I'm sure most of you are. Okay guys, that's it from me for now. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this episode of the vlog and haven't done so already, please hit subscribe on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that. Let me know what you think in the comments of LinkedIn as well. As I said, what I've been most stoked about isn't necessarily the view count, it's the amount of debate that this vlog's created online. I think that's fantastic for the ecosystem in general. Definitely keep your eyes peeled for the next episode. It's going to feature James from Index Exchange. As I said, I'll try and get it online either at the back end of this week or early next week, and it should be good. So I look forward to seeing you in the next one.